Okay, so today I'll be refuting the claim the use of military drones has substantial advantages over person-to-person combat. My opponent used person-to-person combat is no longer the most effective form of war. Military drones reduce PTSD. Mistakes made by military drones are just as likely to occur with human soldiers, and advancements in military drones are practically endless while human soldiers have limitations. To start, I'm going to refute person-to-person combat is no longer the most effective form of war. This can be shown by that a video from a drone is actually very pixelated, while my opponent said enemies no longer identify themselves. Using a pixelated video would not help anything. A quote from Heather Linebaugh, a drone pilot herself, states that what the public needs to understand is that the video provided by a drone is not usually clear enough to detect someone carrying a weapon, even on a crystal clear day with limited cloud and perfect light. This makes it incredibly difficult for the best analysts to identify if someone has weapons for sure. Second of all, drones are computers. Computers can be hacked into by enemies. An article written by The Guardian stated that the worst case scenario is when drones or a fleet of drones have been commandeered or taken control by the enemy. While security measures help make this possibility more difficult, it will never be impossible. So it shows that this has been done before. My opponent went on to say that casualties and financial costs are high with human soldiers, but the civilian casualty rate actually has not changed at all since the use of drones, and drones can't speak to people like humans can. Humans can have a translator, things can be figured out, but drones can't do that. They're going to come, collateral damage happens. To go on to the second about PTSD, which is post-traumatic stress disorder, I don't think I said that earlier, but my opponent said that PTSD does exist a lot in the military, which is true, and that drones cannot attain PTSD, which is also true because a drone is an inanimate object, but the drone's pilot, the person controlling the drone, actually can get PTSD. And not only do these pilots are there doing the killing, but they also have to come back, survey, and see the aftermath of what they had initially caused. Heather Linebaugh, the same drone pilot as before, states that I may have not been on the ground in Afghanistan, but I watched parts of the conflict in great detail on screen for days end. I know the feeling you experience when you see someone die. Horrifying barely covers it. And when you're exposed to it over and over again, it becomes like a small video embedded in your head, forever on repeat, causing psychological pain and suffering that many people will hopefully never experience. She also goes on to say that I find it interesting that suicide statistics in this career field aren't reported, nor the data on how many troops working in UAV positions are heavily medicated for depression, sleep disorders, and anxiety. So not only do the pilots have PTSD, but they're also heavily medicated while they're using these drones. Lastly, I'd like to go on to the point that my opponent had made, that mistakes can be made with drones just as easily with humans. I have some things showing that it actually happens more often. The first known targeted drone strike by the United States occurred on February 4th, 2002 in Afghanistan when a CIA Predator drone fired on a group they believed, including Osama bin Laden. The targets, all killed, were all civilians legally gathering scrap metal. That came from drones.procon.org. So that shows that this actually mistakes are actually higher than with humans, because if a person were to go in there with a translator, things could have been solved properly. Also, another NATO airstrike on 2012 left 11 Afghan civilians, 10 whom were children, dead, trying to get a small terrorist group, but instead they only injured the terrorists, but they killed actually everybody else, a bunch of civilians. So this shows that drones actually make much more horrific mistakes, and you never know who's going to get caught in the crossfire of these drones. So that goes to show that drones are not the most effective form of war, and that person-to-person combat should still be used today. Thank you.
All right, you've identified the main claim very clearly. The secondary issues are labeled, so that's easy. When you get to the first point, you've got a direct statement of that. You start, though, with an explanation about how these drone videos are pixelated. You've got a quote. It sounds like it's a pretty good quote, but I'm not exactly sure what the inference is that I'm supposed to be making from this evidence. And you do that in a couple of spots. You have evidence, but you need to tell us what the claim is. At the end of the speech, when you're doing the summary, I think you're doing a little bit better job about telling us what this all means, but you want to do it as we go along. So, drone targeting is not reliable. There's a definitive, declarative sentence, and then all this. Then I know why I'm looking at or listening about pixelated videos on drones, because you're in essence saying it's not as effective as it ought to be. That's basically how that claim is being supported. The claim about hacking is very speculative. You do have a quote on it. It's hypothetical in nature, but at least it's an additional answer. If we were having a debate, they'd have to expend some time and energy talking about it. I don't know what kind of follow-up you'd be able to get with it, but it's worth investigating. The cost issue, I think you did okay in talking about the fact that you're not going to reduce PTSD or some of the other issues related to operating, the drones are going to result in the same kinds of things. I don't know how many people would be affected by this. I think that would be the most obvious answer, that, well, if we went from 1,000 troops on the ground who are affected by PTSD to one drone operator, then that is a savings in the long run. But I think you had a good argument here, and the evidence that you had, I thought, worked really effectively at demonstrating that it is likely to be shared by other people who aren't directly on the ground. And then the mistakes, I think you go the right direction here, that says, look, we're likely to make mistakes, they're problematic, and of course I think you could tell us why those kinds of mistakes are really problematic, because they increase hostility from the people that we're trying to get cooperation with on the ground. They make us look bad internationally. It gives a talking point to the enemy in these particular situations, and it would be much better if we had direct confrontation. But like I said, I thought the summary did a pretty good job trying to clarify why all of your arguments were there in the first place. All right, thank you.